When the development of the fighter was completed, Zero was said to be the strongest fighter in the world. It could turn in a small radius, had a high flying speed, was heavily armed and had an extraordinary flying range. On the other hand, the plane's fuselage was weak at the expense of its light weight. In order to get the most out of the plane, an excellent operating technique was needed. But with the worsening of the war situation, the engineers of the plane were enlisted and those with low skills began to make the plane. Then the quality of the Zero began to deteriorate. Training pilots also requires time and effort. However, as the war situation worsened, this became impossible. The Japanese military brass at the time gave too much credit to the long range of the Zero fighter. Simply put, the US planes cannot attack the Japanese carriers where they are out of range. On the contrary, the Japanese Zero can attack the US carriers. Juzaburo Ozawa, the Lieutenant General of the Japanese Navy, came up with the so-called outrange tactics. But it didn't work. The pilot's physical ability to concentrate diminishes after a long flight, as they have to keep an eye out for enemy attacks. Even if they could reach the enemy, they would lose if the enemy was strong. In fact, the Japanese force lost a lot of Zero fighters. The Japanese force couldn't even train good pilots. The ability of the Zero fighter was deteriorating. Nevertheless, they wanted to inflict huge damage on the enemy. That's why the special attack was invented. At least the military brass at the time thought that it wouldn't be difficult to crash into an enemy ship, even without advanced piloting skills. Overconfidence in the long-range capabilities of the Zero fighter was probably also a factor. But in reality, the vast majority of kamikaze planes never reached the enemy ships. The special attacks were done not only by kamikaze special attack force, but also by the aircrafts of other units. Whatever may be, most of them were shot down. There are various accounts of special attack by the kamikaze special attack force. It is said that 535 fighters were sent out, and only 1 in 9 fighters managed to hit the enemy ship. And the upper management of the Japanese armed forces who ordered such an operation evaded responsibility, made someone else the scapegoat, and ran away. The original story also depicts it. Those who had written not to volunteer seem to have been called in one by one by his superior officers and persuaded. The persuasion of the superior officer was almost unheard of in the Japanese force at the time. It was impossible to refuse. The most cowardly would be those who survived after the war, even though they ordered their men on the special attack, saying, "I'll follow you later." Things like that must have happened everywhere, even today. Even today, how many people can say no to their bosses in their company or organization at the risk of putting their own necks on the line? In the film The Kingsman, the third in the series, it is shown that the King of the United Kingdom, the German Kaiser, and the Russian Emperor were cousins at the time of the First World War. The villains of the story try to plunge the world into war by sowing discord between them. The fact of history is that the two small countries, Austria and Serbia, faced each other, and then the big countries, Germany and Russia, intervened behind them. And then the limited war developed into a great war. Britain joined the war when Germany invaded Belgium. Behind this may have been the existence of the masterminds portrayed in the film. Although it is not appropriate to simplify the cause of the war, It is described that the behavior of the leaders of the countries could cause a war or intensify it. It is possible that a confrontation between the cousins will occur, and that minions of each will be involved and killed. The Eternal Zero also describes and condemns the fact that many ordinary people were killed just to maintain the appearance or reputation of the upper classes in society. As the war situation worsened, the extraordinary method of special attack was adopted. Kyuzo Miyabe became an instructor of pilots. The purpose was not to train excellent pilots, but to make pilots for the special attack. The students don't train for dogfighting. They just have to rush into the enemy ship. Miyabe does not let his trainee pass the test to become a special attack pilot. That's why he was beaten by his superior officer. Even Miyabe's resistance could not change the trend. One by one, his trainees were forced to join the special attack. He had to train his students to let them die. It drove Miyabe into a mental corner. One day, the names of the members who were going to launch the special attack were mentioned. Miyabe's name was among them. The official story is that all the members of the special attack volunteered. Miyabe may have volunteered, or he may have been persuaded by his superior. It is not really clear, but it is obvious that he accepted the special attack. Why did he do it? It can be speculated that he felt guilty about having to train his pupils to die, and that he tried to kill himself, based on the testimony of the various people. However, the reason why Miyabe accepted the special attack is not clearly stated. Even though this is a novel and Kyuzo Miyabe is a character created by the author Naoki Hyakuta, the story never lets Miyabe himself talk about his feelings. In fact, the truth is hidden in a grove. In the original story, the character of Kyuzo Miyabe emerges from the testimonies of various people. The film must take a different approach. It is possible to limit the setting to the present day and make the film only with the grandchildren, Kentaro and Keiko, interviewing the survivors. But nobody wants to see such a film. It is necessary to show the battle of the Zero Fighter. The past had to be visualized through the memories of the witnesses. Then the director entered his own realm of expression. Although the film is largely faithful to the original novel, many parts of it have been changed. The aforementioned conversation between Miyabe and Izaki is one of them. The part near the end tells the story of Miyabe's wife and daughter. His wife lost her husband and was about to become the mistress of a yakuza. A man appeared in front of her and killed the yakuza with a sword. The story is told by Kenichiro Onishi, Kentaro's grandfather, the man who married Miyabe's widow. As Kentaro listens, he realizes that it is one of the men he interviewed. The sentence, written in Kentaro's first person, describes, "In a moment, a man's face appeared in my mind." It is changed in the film. Kenichiro Onishi doesn't talk about it in front of Kentaro and others. The scene is portrayed as him remembering his wife's confession after they left. That's all in the film. But one of the characters comes to mind even though the film doesn't show him at the time. You could say it was an effective change. And the last scene deserves special mention. Kyuzo Miyabe, who rode the fighter for the special attack, heads towards the enemy's aircraft carrier. Miyabe uses all of his skills and don't let the enemy hit him with their bullets. The enemy aircraft carrier approaches in front of him. Miyabe then lifts one side of his mouth and shows a fearless smile. The original novel doesn't have this account. In the original story, Miyabe is described only by the witnesses. The film ends with a close-up of Miyabe's fearless smile in the cockpit. How is this fearless smile should be interpreted? There have been various speculations and arguments. Let me give my opinion. It is because Miyabe chose pleasure rather than rightness at the end. Kyuzo Miyabe is the one who has a modern value system and has mistakenly chosen the era in which he was born. That's why he hates wasting a life. Returning to his wife and child is the most important thing to him. He believes that the war should be fought rationally, if at all possible. The results would have been better if they had fought every battle as he insisted. If he thinks the way the Navy is doing things is wrong, he objects. It is what is right. But man cannot live by rightness alone. It is necessary to live with pleasure. The urge of the moment might be a better expression. The passion that you want to do, even if it is not rational and logical. Man is greatly influenced by such things. Miyabe is an excellent pilot. He seems to have had a desire to fight and to demonstrate his techniques to his heart's content. He also had the same feelings as the other soldiers. Although he knew it was wrong, he felt that he wanted to do it. It can be said that the other soldiers who confronted Miyabe expressed Miyabe's own conflict. If you want to be right, you should behave rationally. If you want to have fun, you should do what you want to do. These often conflict. Miyabe is torn between the feeling that he doesn't want to create more victims and the situation that doesn't allow it. The feeling that he wants to be rational and the feeling that he wants to fight to his heart's content, ignoring rationality, conflict. Even though he kept running away from the confusing battles in the air, he kept having the desire to fight. He was plagued by a sense of guilt for having sent his pupils into the special attacks. In the end, his emotions seem to have had an extremely complex conflict. He thought out a method to resolve them. He left his wife and child and do the special attack himself. It will be the reason why Miyabe, who rushes into the enemy's aircraft carrier, fearlessly smiles. The film ends with his fearless smile. The only part of the film that shows Miyabe from the camera's point of view, rather than the characters, is this scene, several seconds at the last. Only this expression made the character of Miyabe completely different from the one from the original novel. It can be said to be an extremely challenging expression. As far as the original novel is concerned, it seems to have been unsuccessful. The special attack of the Zero Fighter, which seems to be Miyabe, is described from the point of view of a US soldier. The Zero Fighter crashes into the aircraft carrier Ticonderoga, on which the US soldier has boarded. But the carrier didn't sink. The bomb did not explode. As the special attack was unsuccessful, the US soldier survived and reminisces it. The film ends just before the Zero Fighter crashes into the carrier. In both the original novel and the film, the father of the protagonist, Kentaro, doesn't appear. Many people seem to wonder why. The protagonist is 26 and his mother is still alive. His unrelated grandfather is alive. His father, who is presumed to be alive, doesn't appear for some reason, and the reason is not explained. Why? This is probably because Miyabe and his grandfather Kenichiro play the role of his father in the story. The protagonist's grandfather is a lawyer and he also tries to become a lawyer, but he always fails. Then he knows that he is not related to his grandfather. He is worried that he does not have the qualities to be a lawyer. His mother's father turns out to be a Zero fighter pilot who is said to be a coward. He is disappointed, but he grows up during the investigation of the nature of his real grandfather. These two grandfathers play the role of his father. This seems to be the reason why the real father doesn't appear. On the 11th of September 2001, terrorism struck. In the United States, the planes were hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center and other buildings. Many media in the world called it kamikaze. That is, many people thought that the kamikaze special attack force was for suicide terrorism. Many people still think that today. But I'd like you to think it over. Is the kamikaze special attack force same as the terrorism by the hijacked airplane? Do the people who regard them as the same think coolly? The special attack is the attack against the enemy's force or its facilities. The terrorism by the airplane in 9/11 was done by hijacking the civilians' airplanes and crashing into the civilians' facilities. The English word suicide attack is regarded to be terrorism by suicide bombing. It seems to be defined as an attack on civilians. Have you ever heard of the Geneva Conventions? The convention forbids harming civilians. It was adopted in 1949, and it was 2001 when 9/11 happened. You know that even today, there are countries that kill civilians in war. In the special attack of the kamikaze special attack force or other units, there are no attacks that target civilians. There may be examples where civilians were involved and injured or killed, but there is not a single example of civilians being targeted. The way to fight in which you will definitely die may look abnormal. In fact, it will be abnormal. The Eternal Zero doesn't think it's decent either. But isn't it possible that the situation in which such a way of fighting is required exists in every country and in every era? There are people who do something to save their comrade's life, knowing that you will definitely die in any country. You see in front of you a grenade with a missing pin. If one person died, the others can survive. And there are those who covered the grenade with their bodies and became victims in every country. The United States won the Battle of Midway, but it cost them dearly. When the US forces found the Japanese aircraft carrier, they sent in the attack planes one after the other. It is almost suicide to send torpedo bombers without fighter support. In fact, many of the US torpedo bombers were shot down by the Japanese Zero fighters, and the crew of the US torpedo bombers must have been prepared for this. Attack to save one's comrades at the cost of one's own life will be seen in every country and in every era. Bruce Willis in the film Armageddon saved the Earth knowing that he would die. Is he mad? It goes without saying that the most important thing is not to wage war. If it has to be done, the least that should be done is to distinguish civilians from soldiers. And if you don't understand that, you risk becoming a terrorist yourself. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up.